It's great to be here. I'm just recovering from some leg surgery, so this is the first time I've been out of the house for some time, so I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. Thank you. Beware of wet linoleum. Okay, I'm going to be talking a bit about one part of the New Deal that particularly concerns me at this point because we're losing so much of it. In fact, we're losing all of the New Deal, but I'm going to talk about some of the physical things and the very beautiful things that we're losing. This sculpture, by the way, is part of a sculptural series of sculptures at one of the New Deal towns, Greenbelt, Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C., in which the sculptor Lenore Thomas illustrated the preamble to the Constitution and was paid by the WPA to do so. So we are losing the post office, as I'm about to show you, while the press sleeps on it. And I can come back to that later on. This is one of the New Deal post offices. They built about 1,100 of them as part of the campaign to get the economy going. It's just off Madison Square in New York. It's a jewel box, and I walked in there a few years ago to see the murals on the inside of it. Here's one of them. The immigrant experience in New York, and I was stopped from photographing it. That was the last photograph I was able to take by a clerk who said, "You can't do that." I said, "Of course I can do that. My parents paid for that. It belongs to us." And she said, "No, it belongs to us, the Postal Service." And I said, "No, it doesn't. And if it does that entitle you to sell it?" She didn't know. Well, we're answering that now. By the way, this is the plaque that you see going in. It's absolutely beautiful. I mean, they didn't spare on these things, and it shows the cast of characters. As I said, they did 1,100 post offices and many, many more murals and sculptures than that. Now, last November, I was briefly in Philadelphia, and I went across the street from the train station to photograph this New Deal post office. It's the main post office right on the river. It's spectacular. And I walked up to photograph the lobby, and the guard stopped me and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm just photographing the lobby." And he said, "You can't do that. It's not public anymore." I said, "Yes, it is. We paid for it." And he said, "No, it's been sold, and if you try to take a photograph, we'll arrest you and take your camera." And I said to the guard, I said, "You know, they're taking everything away from us." And he said, "I know they are. Now get out of here." So, fortunately, several years ago, I had photographed the lobby. This is it. This post office was sold by the Postal Service to the University of Pennsylvania, which then flipped it to a private developer for $30 million less. They sold it for $51 million. It was flipped for $30 million less to a developer who then leased it back to the federal government for use of IRS, but it's a private building now. We can't get into it. Now, I became aware of what was going on about 2 years ago when I found out that the downtown post office in Modesto was for sale. It's now, this is the inside, the lobby with the murals on it. It's all travertine, brass, beautiful, like those post offices of that time. And they said it was going to be relocated to a suburban shopping mall. That is code for sold, because by saying that they're just relocating these post offices, they get around all of the environmental laws, historic stuff, and they can really sort of just basically kick the public to the curb on this. Then the Ukiah post office came up for sale. Now, it's interesting that Modesto and Ukiah are the county seats of their respective counties. These post offices are directly downtown. And so that's been sold too. It's going to be turned into a restaurant, the other one into a condominium. And it was sold despite 5,000 signatures. Now, for Ukiah, that's pretty good, but people didn't want it sold. But the USPS just ignored them, as it always does. This was the mural on the inside. It was removed for restoration and relocation. It's now in Chicago somewhere. We don't know when or if it will come back. The post office in Bethesda, Maryland, downtown Maryland, it's the only historic building left in Bethesda, right next to the metro stop. It's been sold. The doors have been padlocked. although they're ajar, so that the mural on the inside of the local women's cooperative has been deteriorating. I hear that they've just put it into storage, so we may never see that one again. The post office in Crockett has been completely trashed. It might have been demolished. I shot this some time ago. The post office in Venice with this wonderful mural has been sold to the violence pornographer Joel Silver, who's going to use it for film production. And he says that the mural will be available 6 times a year by appointment. So that's keeping it public. The Redlands post office is sale pending now, although that's the inside of it. It's on the National Register. This wonderful woman, Carly Miller, has been fighting a one-woman campaign to save it. Camas, Washington is up for sale. Let's see. See that sign? You can own a historic post office. You just, pay $650,000 for it, and you could probably get them down on it. The post office in Reading, Massachusetts is sale pending. The one in Annapolis is pending. Oops. Berkeley's is pending right now. And this is the company that got the exclusive right to sell them back in 2011, CBRE, the world's largest commercial real estate company. Interesting, isn't it, that it's owned by Richard C. Blum, the Alpha Regent of the University of California, who has been privatizing my university. If you don't recognize Richard Blum, there he is, right behind that waving guy. And there's his lovely wife, Senator Feinstein. This gives you some idea of the power of this couple, that they were flanking Obama. Michelle's not even in the picture. They're flanking Obama during his first inaugural. And they're major rainmakers for the Democratic Party. Well, here we are back in D.C., where Diane spends so much of her time representing not us, but other people. I should say people as corporations. This is the old post office. There's the first Postmaster General, Ben Franklin. And the old post office has just been sold to Donald Trump for a 5-star hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue. Well, we've come a long ways from Ben Franklin and the whole idea of public service of the post office. This is in the Postal Museum. It was one of the past Postmaster Generals. As I say, so many of them are decorated with wonderful murals and sculpture. That's largely because of the work of Eleanor Roosevelt and some of these other gentlemen. This is actually from Coit Tower. These are the visionaries who created the arts projects during the Great Depression to put artists back to work, at the same time building a democratic civilization. Now, here's something that Edward Bruce, one of those guys, said in a publication. The money on this art project has produced a social worth which is impossible to estimate in actual money values as well as in permanent spiritual value. I believe that the government has received much more than it has spent. There is no doubt that some of this work will be known as great. Almost all of it will be an addition to our faith and our civilization. These guys spoke often in a language, I'm writing about this, the lost ethical language of New Deal public work. They were building and conceived of a civilization worthy of the name. Now, when has the present occupant of the White House ever spoken in those terms, let alone about poverty or mass extinction or, well, I should just calm down. Here's another I didn't think so. Here's another post office mural in Roosevelt's hometown, Hyde Park. And this is what Roosevelt said about the murals in the post offices and elsewhere, that his administration would be remembered for the art projects, because of course they're building a civilization, an American civilization. Now, here's the current Postmaster General, the lineal descendant of Ben Franklin and Wanamaker and all the rest of them. He's quite a different piece of baggage. This is what he said. The Postal Service is the first to acknowledge how important it is to preserve our historic buildings, which is why we are going through a lengthy and transparent process to assure their protection before they are sold. Okay. Oh, this is from the letter that he just wrote to Mayor Bates of Berkeley. He also boasted that he's just, laid off through attrition 193,000 workers. Another 40,000 are coming up. This is his way of saving the Postal Service for FedEx and Pitney Bowes and UPS, which want their profit centers. Now, these post offices, which are in the heart of all of our major cities and towns, were emblems of community pride and the federal government, as you can see from this vintage postcard. Bear in mind that in the 19th century, the Vanderbilts and the Morgans and et cetera, the Huntingtons, the Stanfords, they went for the public lands outside of the city. Well, that land is gone. As Gar was saying this morning, what's now available is prime inner-city real estate at the heart of all of our cities, if you can get the contract to sell it, and CBRE, i.e. Mr. Richard Blum, did. Okay, they are America's piazzas. This is where Americans come together, and I've heard lots of complaints about the post office from people who live in the city. They have no idea what a post office represents for rural towns, let alone elderly people, handicapped people, etc. The post office is extremely, especially if you want to vote by mail. You soon won't be able to do that, apparently. In many of the small towns, they are like little palaces, like in Merced. This is the mural on the inside of Merced. San Jose. In the big cities, they really get palatial. This is Washington, D.C., the old post office department, now the EPA, closed to the public. You can't get in to see the murals anymore unless you have special permission. Manhattan really got it big. This is the inside, the lobby of the Farley Post Office. I'm just going to show you some of the lobbies. I want you to see how these buildings and these spaces, these public spaces, speak to us in a language which we have been persuaded to forget. There's an amplitude about them that you just don't get in the back of a Walmart or a CVS pharmacy, which is where they're moving to. We're relocating. Look at the furniture in these post offices. That's in Minneapolis. This one's back in Washington. This is the old San Francisco post office. By the way, at the end of it, you can still see the Postal Savings Bank room where people transacted their banking. This is the newer San Francisco post office, Rincon Annex, San Jose. Love Poughkeepsie. We'll come back to San Pedro in a little bit. Look at the detailing on these buildings. Think of the artisans that they put to work. That one, sale is pending. And just the craftsmanship. I could give a whole lecture on the eagles of American post offices. So let's look at the artwork that's inside those buildings, inside so many of them. I have friends from Australia who love to come here and take road trips through the US just so that they can visit the post offices, because they don't have anything like that in Australia. In fact, no country does. It's a unique American art form, and it belongs to us. So there are themes in the post office, murals, and et cetera. One of the most prevalent is local history and legends. This is the legend of Sleepy Hollow in Troy, New York, near the Catskills. The arrival of the train. The pioneers are always popular. Here's Berkeley. As is Conquest, Monterey. As is the meeting of the new settlers with the original inhabitants, such as in Poughkeepsie, for example. Ooh, look, who's come? I wonder what they have to bring us. The Pueblo Indians. There they are, looking with a little bit of apprehension at these guys, the conquistadors who are coming in. And then this is one of my favorites in Hopewell, Virginia. This is making friends with the Indians. Would you like to see my cabin? My etchings, perhaps? Now, in most post office murals, of course, the meeting of the cultures is friendly. The greatest murals are over in San Francisco at the Rincon Annex, the old post office, by Anton Refregier. There's an implied criticism here in that the Indians were the ones who provided the labor to build the missions, while that guy in the back was preaching from a book. One thing you were not supposed to paint in the murals in post offices was violence. Refregier went beyond that. There's lots of violence in them, and that's part of the reason that these murals and history itself were put on trial in Washington in 1953. Came very close to being destroyed. So, another theme that you see over and over again is work and local economies, because of course this is not being done during the Depression when work is on everybody's minds, jobs, because they don't have them. So you see over and over again, work. This is what people wanted, what they needed to get the economy going again. Modesto again. Agriculture is a big theme, including industrial agriculture. This one's gorgeous. Now, let's see what's happening. These are Ben Shah's series of murals in the Bronx Central Post Office. Sale is pending on that building. There are 13 of them. Those murals showing work, industry in the U.S. are worth more than the building and the land that it's on. Let's go back to the Rincon Post Office, because what Refregier was trying to do in this series of murals that he did, 28 in all, was to show the history of San Francisco as the history of human civilization seen through the eyes of labor. It should be labor's Taj Mahal. So you get to see work, the building of the railroads, the building of the Golden Gate Bridge, the arsenal of democracy, and they're multiracial. This got him into trouble too. The Hearst papers said that Mr. Refregier seemed to be obsessed with Negroes. Okay, this is Salinas. It has sculptures of a vaquero and a wrangler. Sebastopol has a wonderful mural of the local source of wealth. This is down in Culver City. This apparently was the set of Gone with the Wind as they were striking it. Redwood City has a mural of workers gathering gladioli and other flowers. It's a reminder of forgotten industries that have disappeared. And South San Francisco shows the industrial side of the city as well as Butchertown down there. Now, one of the other things that you see over and over again in post office art is the Postal Service itself heroized and glorified. I should say the workers. Whether it's in Freeport, you can see transportation, but above all, communication and the workers. These are huge sculptures on the other Philadelphia post office. I don't know whether it's been sold yet. Mail delivery in the east, the west, the south, and the north. And this is on the outside of it. I don't know what that represents, but it's just wonderful. Stockton, the stagecoach. Same thing, also in Stockton. And right here in San Rafael, that post office is also for sale, so you could go over and see the mural while it's still there. This is in Independence. I haven't seen this one, but it gives you an idea. Imagine what it would be like to be a worker in the post office and see yourself heroized. I mean, there is a heroism in letter carriers, for example, which we who stay in our homes, we too often forget, actually. It's dangerous and hard work. And it's getting harder as Mr. Donahoe cuts back. Here's reading letters from the mailbox. Oops. And another one in Burlingame, also for sale. My favorite is San Pedro, a glorification, a beautiful building, and a glorification of the work, the public work that postal workers do. Okay, and this is on the Berkeley Post Office. It's a sculpture by David Slivka, again, heroizing the postal workers. And that guy is holding up a package, and there's an address on it. It says, from David Slivka to all mankind, truth abode on Freedom Road. You have to get a binocular to see that. But it was his message. All right, Anton Refregier painted the great Rincon Annex murals after the war. The war had interfered with it, so he came back and did it. And this is a mural on the section representing the arts. It took me years to figure out what was happening here. What it is by 1946-47, those art projects have been abolished, along with so much else of the New Deal Public Works program. So he shows the artists working on a wall, sculpting and painting, and then at the end it says Federal Art Program, and it gives its beginning and its end. It's its tombstone. It's the end of it. We had that brief period, that renaissance with the sponsorship of the visionary Roosevelt administration. Okay, so this is all to remind us that we own these buildings and we own this art, and it's being taken away from us right now, and the press is paying no attention. It's absolute. I can't tell you how many reporters from the New York Times down, television reporters I have talked to who will do a story and they will never mention the involvement of CBRE, Dianne Feinstein, and Richard Blum. So in LaborFest next month, we're going to actually have a panel in LaborFest called Too Big to Name. And it's going to be about the complicity of the press. And we're going to have that vanishing species investigative reporters come to talk about what has happened to journalism in the last few years. That's very much what Matt Taibbi talked about last night, that there's no cops on the beat anymore. And so these guys can get away with anything. But not in Berkeley. We've really been putting up a fight. This is one of the many demonstrations outside. And you can go to the website, savethebppostoffice.com, to find out what the activists are doing. This is one of the hearings, one of the fruitless hearings that we had with the Postal Service people. It was standing room only, people out the door, etc. It didn't matter. About a month later, they announced they were going to sell the post office. But you can go to the National, the National Post Office Collaborate.com website, because we're launching legal action against them. And we're building a nationwide coalition of affected communities, because everybody thinks that they're alone. But increasingly, people in Chelsea and the Bronx and Redlands, et cetera, they're standing up. Now, they will be crushed unless we can get the money for the legal action which we're going, because this has never been challenged in court before. You can get those links by going to my alternate article. This was just published or posted on Saturday, and I think it's been, but anyway, go to alternate. And just in that search box up on the right, just type in my name, and it'll take you right to it, because they archive things pretty quickly. So it'll give you all of the links that you need. Finally, go to our website, The Living New Deal. It's headquartered over at the Geography Department in Berkeley. We are we're documenting and mapping the physical legacy of the New Deal. Not only did those public works programs put millions of people to work, as Tim just said, getting the economy going again, but it left us an extraordinary collection of beautiful buildings, parks, airports, sewage systems. We're using it all the time. Even Republicans use it. Tea Partiers use it, and they don't know it, and they don't want to know it. So we're going to make them know it by mapping it. We're up to 4,000 points. We're now doing a project we've already pretty well mapped New Deal San Francisco. Next step is New Deal Washington, D.C. I want to rub it in their faces how much of Washington is thanks to Franklin Roosevelt and the people he gathered around himself. Harry Hopkins, Harold Ickes, honest Harold Ickes, Mariner Eccles, and of course, his wife, his incomparable wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, and the people she gathered around herself as well, too. We do need contributions. We're running on fumes right now. It's amazing what we've accomplished, but we really do need contributions. If you need to know more, I've got cards up here, and you can contact us. And you can also become involved in the Living New Deal, which is democratic. It's all over the country, and there's never been anything like it. The long-term goal is to build the nation's first New Deal museum and memorial to those millions of people who brought us out of the Depression. Not just to the ones at the top, the CCC boys, the WPA workers, all of them. They've never been thanked for what they did. We thank the veterans of our wars. We have never thanked the veterans of our great and forgotten peacetime armies. And that's what our New Deal Museum and Memorial will be. Oh, thank you. There we go. Any kind of questions?
Take two questions.
Okay, two questions. All right. Sure. How? Yes. Yeah. The meme is that the Postal Service is way broke. It's, billions of dollars in debt and everything. It's complex, which is, just the way that those people who engineered it want it to be. If you want to find out more, go to savethepostoffice.com, maintained by an NYU professor. It will explain it all. The major reason that it's going broke is because in 2006, Congress passed the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act. It looks like it was drafted by ALEC. Nobody's done any investigation on who did it. But clearly FedEx and UPS and Pitney Bowes were probably behind it, and it basically requires the Postal Service to prepay its medical care for its employees 75 years in the future within 10 years. Nobody else. That is deliberately designed to bankrupt the Postal Service and put it out of business. It's an ingenious way to, as has been said, to starve the beast. But it's a roundabout way, so most people don't realize what's happening. One more? I know several of them. One was Susan Collins of Maine, who introduced that bill. Again, there's been very little research done on it. It was Orrin Hatch. Okay. Susan Collins, interestingly enough, is now getting tremendous pressure from her constituents because she represents a rural state, Maine. And they don't like what's happening as their post offices are being closed, even though she was one of the co-sponsors of that. So it's quite interesting, but I think I don't want to butt into the next speaker, so okay. Thank you.